Thank you for listening to the Music Production Podcast. I'm your host, Brian Funk. On today's show, I had the pleasure to speak with Matt Sharp. Matt is the creative force behind the Rentals. He's a founding member and the original bass player of Weezer. On this episode, Matt spoke about his new album, Q36 by the Rentals. He spoke about his creative process, some stories from the old days, and it was a great pleasure to speak with him. On a personal note, Matt's work has been a huge influence in my life, so this is basically me sitting down with one of my musical superheroes. It was a lot of fun. We started talking about the whole coronavirus thing, but we decided to cut that out to keep things a little more light and optimistic. So in the beginning, you might hear us reference that. That's what we're talking about. But this episode is really about the fun of creating music. And it was really great to pick the brain of someone whose work has had such a huge impact and brought so much joy to my own life. So I hope you enjoy the show. First, let me just say thank you, of course. This is really cool of you to do. It's very exciting for me to talk to you, too. I'm a longtime fan.
Thank you.
Yeah, your work has been a big part of my musical journey. So this is a great opportunity for me on a personal level. So thanks.
Oh man, I appreciate those nice words. They're very kind of you to say. Well, you could start it from this point forward if you feel like it. It's personally, I find myself it's going to stay in this time for a half second, but personally I find myself more comforted by things that are not made in a reaction to the situation. Something like the beginning of this interview I wouldn't find very comforting. I would, or all of the live from home stuff. For me, I mean, it's everybody's, reacts to everything differently. But for me, I find the most comfort in things that were sort of made without these times in mind, just whatever they might be. We just the last two shows I've been watching was the show 000, which is a kind of a drug cartel a show on Amazon, and Devs on Hulu are the two shows that I've sort of been like immersed in. And they're both made, they're made without consideration of these times, and they don't really say something about these times. And I find myself excited to get into those places, or with albums or whatever that are just pieces of art that are not
Right.
a reflection on the situation we're in, because we're dealing with that, with everything else in our lives. So I like to be able to switch into something that's
the escapism.
Yeah.
Escape into the horrors of the drug cartel.
Well, I mean, there's some in this latest album that I'm releasing now. A lot of it was made with that in mind. The songs were written with escape as a central theme, essentially. All the songs take place or are linked together by outer space, and either they're science fiction or science fact, I guess. But the majority of them were written when I was kind of going through some darker stuff with my family, and my father was ill, and and I didn't notice until I kind of pulled back. I wrote 50 songs before we started this, before deciding what I was going to focus on. And my only rule was to write something that didn't start from my own story. I started writing in the beginning. I wrote a couple songs and just found myself exhausted with my own, just bored to tears with my own sort of autobiographical page out of the diary little 3-minute stories or whatever, and just kind of put the guitar down and sort of took a break and said, okay, here's a challenge for yourself in one of these internal conversations of just saying, write 50 songs, and the only rule is they are not about they're not autobiographical. So like look for what interests you and just start from that point. And that's the only rule. So if I I wrote 50 plus songs right around there somewhere, just not fully arranged, but just the all of the lyrics and the structure and the chords and the main melodies, just sort of the scaffolding of the songs, and then kind of pulled back and said, there's probably an album in here somewhere. And when I pulled back, I realized at least 50% of the songs were taking place in outer space, and realized that was just, some attempt to not, be here, boots on the ground, in reality, just to go someplace else and to lose yourself in other worlds and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I've been listening to the album, wearing my NASA shirt to represent.
Yeah, that's nice. I noticed that.
And first of all, I love it. It's great.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, it's really cool, and it does have that like unifying theme. It feels like a whole piece, like one giant thing. And something I was really like, and this is I guess a thing I've been kind of exploring myself too, is like here you are like kind of purposely avoiding the personal expression thing, right? And you've got this idea, and then the space thing comes up a lot. I just find it really cool how even though you're going so far away from yourself, I assume you've never been an astronaut from what I know about you, yet like so many like human nature style things come out, so many like personal real emotions. It's something that I've gotten out of like great novels that are, totally different from any experience I would ever have, or just this even like certain songs. I think of like Bruce Springsteen and on his Nebraska record, and he's talking about like his little sister in the front seat of his car, and he's so specific about these details that are not me, but it makes it such a more personal connection in that
right
way.
that you can put yourself in that place.
Yeah, so through this idea, this outer space thing, like it's actually like hits close to home, surprisingly, even though it's not kind of meant to be that way.
Well, I mean, I think what can be the most interesting thing is that, of course, you choose those themes for a reason, and you find commonalities in other people's stories, and you find your story within other people's story. So even if you're trying to avoid doing that, inevitably you're connected by those things, and just for the in that way, whatever, a book or a song or whatever can be even more personal just by the things you choose, right? And of course, you will, like a photographer, a photo of a model isn't like a pure representation of the model. It's it's a collaboration between both. I mean, it's a collaboration between both the photographer and the model, and whoever's doing lights, if they're kind of doing some big shoot or whatever. I mean, or in the environment itself and all of those things. And I look at this album that way for sure. That's it feels, for me personally, it feels like the most expressive thing that I've done in my career. and it's odd to feel there. I guess there was just some liberation in not talking so specifically about whatever the slice of life stuff type of writing is. When you're kind of getting away from there, you're actually able, at least I was able to connect a little bit more emotionally to it, and to be able to sing better than I've ever sang in my life. I feel, because it wasn't so on the nose, and so, this is the situation I have right now with the woman I'm dating, or whatever it is, whatever you're singing about, or this, this woman left me, or this problem, or whatever the most common things we all write about are. And I found it, some things that literally have nothing to do with me feel the most emotive as far as like performance goes, and connection, feeling like actually super connected to something. The song Ninth Configuration is literally the synopsis of the novel Ninth Configuration, and the film of the same name. And I can't say why exactly, but when I was working on it, I didn't think it was going to be something that we were actually going to record or see fully through. It was just something I did for me, as a little kind of creative challenge. Bowie had just passed when shortly before that song came out. I was thinking like, just kind of like having like letting myself have a little bit of fun, and just kind of singing overtly in like a parody of his thing. And I started singing this kind of jibber jabber of this kind of thing about an astronaut in an insane asylum, but really going over the top in this sort of kind of Broadway Bowie sort of affect. And it was just for me. It was just to see if I could do it, and just to have a little bit of just have fun with it. And I found that it opened up all these different parts of, it shocked me. It sort of opened up different parts and registers of my voice. And I was like, oh, that's strange. I can actually sing up here where I didn't normally think I could sing, just because I'm putting on somebody else's persona,
Right.
And it was just like I said, it was just a thing for me to do for fun. And I started researching, like, has there ever been an astronaut, either from the Russian program or our program or the Chinese space program or wherever, that didn't cope with coming back to civilian life well, and had to be admitted to an insane asylum, because that's sort of what the scratch thought was. And I was researching it and couldn't find any literal thing, but that book and novel came up, which is one of the two core characters in the novel is an astronaut that's in an insane asylum. So I just essentially took that story and kind of wrote my own version of that. And still, it was just something, like I said, it was like more of a creative challenge. It wasn't a thing I was taking seriously for of sharing with anybody or putting out. And this album has three, besides myself, has three kind of pillars to it. Dave Fridman, who mixed the album, and Ronnie Vanucci, who played drums over top of like programming and things that I had done before we started working together, and Nick Zinner, the guitar player from the AAS. And it started with Nick, and basically when I invited him over to my little home studio and played him a few songs to see if he was interested. The first song that I played him was the song Elon Musk Is Making Me Sad. And I played that for him and asked him if he was interested in collaborating on this album, but if he was interested, I'd want him to do the whole thing. And lucky enough for me, he told me that he was interested. And from that point, I decided, okay, we have 50 plus songs here to choose from. I'm going to let him choose all of the material that figure out what we're going to work on. And I knew that the only thing, the kind of overarching thing is that I wanted it to focus on the kind of more space themed songs, but I left it up to him to decide what he wanted to work on and didn't want to work on. And if he didn't want to work on it, then we just put those aside. And right towards the end of it, I was like, oh, I forgot. I have this thing. It's really silly. I'm kind of embarrassed to play for you because I'm like singing in this kind of ridiculous way that isn't really my voice. And it does sound sort of like I don't know if a Weird Al thing is correct, but it sounded a little goofy, because I was really, really going overboard with it. And he connected with that song instantly. And it was like, oh no, for sure, we're doing that. And I was like, oh no, it's just it's this thing is just just something I wanted to play because it made me laugh. But he was like, no, there's something there. All you have to do is sing it in your own voice, And it was a really interesting thing because I was singing in somebody else's voice, I was able to do all these things that I didn't think that I was capable of doing. I guess being more emotive, more emotional, more dramatic or something. So he's like, you can still do all those things. You just have to do it as yourself. And then you realize, oh, if I can do it as this in this other person's persona, I guess I could do it. There shouldn't be any reason I can't do it in my own, So it's funny. And that's when that song came out, there were certainly a few people that said, oh, it really reminds me of Bowie or something like that. And that's the reason for it. I tried to take that out as much as I could, but I'm glad that there's remnants of that in there.
I could hear that, and that's actually probably my favorite track. Ninth Configuration.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah,
that's great.
Just that, and it's funny. Like I feel a real connection to it in a way that's weird because I'm not an astronaut either. I'm not in a funny farm, and but the idea of the lyric goes, "Captain, why are you afraid of the moon? What kind of captain would be afraid?" Along those lines.
Yes.
But the idea of breaking down to fear that's like a human thing, and it comes out you really kind of relate to that character in the song, and you kind of understand I'd be afraid to go to the moon myself anyway, probably, as cool as it would be. But just the idea of succumbing to fear is such a cool universal theme.
Yeah, in the novel, I think he is the astronaut is afraid to go to the moon because when he arrives at the moon, he's going to realize that there is no God. And if there is no God, then what is the meaning of life for his character?
Right.
I'm not it's funny. I'm not I'm not at all a religious person. I wasn't brought up that way. But like you said, it's more of a universal thing of what are you afraid of in those, and that is the connection maybe.
Well, I like the idea of kind of not being afraid to be a little goofy. And, it's funny to hear you say that because, coming from me, just to give you some background, because I think maybe I owe it to you, but
yes, while you're talking, I'm going to plug in this thing. I hope it doesn't mess us up because we're losing some. We're down to 12%, and I don't want to crash on us. Continue from where you are.
Okay. So, I've started playing guitar at about 14, right? Learning the riffs and getting into lots of, I was learning Nirvana and a lot of even Pantera, stuff just that was fun to play on guitar. When Weezer came along, it was a really big moment for us because like all of that other music has like an image, kind of like a persona. And I got just the impression from you guys that you were just being yourselves. You weren't trying to be anything and you weren't afraid to be a little goofy with it. And it just really changed the way I saw music. And it almost like, at that like tender age, gave us like something we could connect to, something people that feel like us a little bit, like they're guys too. They're just dudes like us, and they're not they're not like these like personas that like no one could ever really be, like an Axl Rose or but
Sure.
like the work you guys did, and then when the Rentals came out right around that time too, it was just really opened up the world for us. And it was that sort of like we were very serious about it, but not taking yourself too seriously kind of thing too, if that makes sense. Where it's super important, it means a lot to you, but it's just a little bit of lightheartedness to it that was really nice to have.
Well, it's funny. Even though this has nothing really to do with Weezer or anything, but you began talking earlier in the beginning of our conversation about Nebraska and Bruce Springsteen, and how he was able to make you feel like you were sitting in the car next to him, or you were sitting riding shotgun in this situation or whatever it was. Mm-hmm. And I think in exactly what you said, there's probably something in there that's relatable to Weezer. It's just like, I was never a big Springsteen person. I loved Dancing in the Dark, like most people. But I did spend a little time with Nebraska, but I don't profess to know any like really super deep tracks or any sort of connection like that. But I do know that he connected with people in just being an every man, maybe something that wasn't represented at that time. Maybe there was, I can't think of what it would have been that he would have been coming up against, or where the music world was at that point. But there was obviously something where people went, oh, this guy is speaking for a group of people that isn't well represented in pop music at that time, or he wouldn't have been such an iconic figure, and I think we were lucky enough to have the kind of success we had, because all of that stuff is contingent upon so much chance, Right. But I always felt that the connection that we did have with people was it always felt like a very natural thing. Like it was driven from the audience. It was driven from people finding that sort of similar connection of, nobody was representing us in the way that you guys are, or something like that. For exactly what you were talking about, I know that we went through that when we were starting as a group. I talked about this with somebody very recently, but up to that point in my life, everything was about kind of wanting to shortcut your way to whatever, right? To just like, I want to skip all those steps and I want to go right to, this thing. I want to go right to where my dream is without having to actually put in the work, and putting in the work is that the time of like self-discovery, and really just being relentless with asking yourself questions of who are we? What do in every sense of the word of who are we really? What's not who do we want to be, but who are we with as it regards to music, or the way, or the shoes we might wear, or whatever, or the places we might play, or the places, people we may be associated with, or the things that we're interested in beyond music, and all those things. We were at that point in life of just deep diving, and I had a partner in Rivers who was equally as just intellectually curious about those things, and we set out on that together to kind of get an understanding of all those things. So I was just saying that we realized, just sort of doing the work and doing the grind of it and not skipping steps, you find yourself asking those, basically that one question over and over and over and over and over again, like millions of times. Who are we? What do we want? Where do we belong? All those kind of very basic questions, that don't have to be necessarily just for music. It could be if you're just where you're at in life. And we were doing that together. And, I think we kind of, we were coming out of the era of or just on the fringes of all the Seattle music and all the Nirvana's thing. And, we had to realize, that's not who we are, just that. Then you go back to the same question. Then who are you? Okay, we're not heroin addicts that are sleeping under a bridge or doing whatever, not to be reductive with like Kurt or anything like that, but we weren't this sort of romantic, waifishly thin sort of, whatever, rugged bunch of characters. We were just these very probably nauseatingly, boringly normal humans, but that's the question that you keep asking yourself. And Rivers and I would go out every night to see local bands and say, okay, well, we're not that, but, and we just look for anything. If we could find a melody and a bridge from some band, do we connect with it? Do we connect anywhere in this thing? And almost all of the time it was, the answer was no. I think by the time we actually, we had friends. We made some friends that are still dear friends to this day for me, that were in other bands and things like that. But we never really connected musically with any of them. There was never a real, we didn't come out with our first record and feel like, oh, we're coming out with a bunch of people who are, making music just like we're not doing this as a big collective. We felt certainly isolated, and we just never felt like we really belonged in any particular group of people. We were either, too uncool for something, or whatever. We weren't heavy enough, or we weren't arty enough, or we weren't, there was whatever was going on at the time. But if you keep honestly asking yourself that question, well, if you're not, this band that's in this, that's got like a tuba player and like some like feedback over top and, some abstract something that would be like super, super, super cool to go see. And then you go, okay, well then if we're not that, then who are we? And if we're not this, then who are we? And if we don't, and if we don't dress like this, then how do we dress? Who are we? Individually, and as a, that would go for who am I as a bass player, or who is, or, and each one of us asking that kind of, I'm assuming that's what most groups do, but we were particularly like just coming back to the point of we don't know anything, that we would always sort of put ourselves at the bottom of the food chain and go like, we're nothing, and ultimately come back to that feeling of we don't know anything yet. We don't know who we are. We don't know what this is. And we were just brutally self-deprecating about what losers, especially Rivers and I, about each of us were, and we could dish it out to each other and take it. And we had a sort of a feeling that what was good about our approach was that nobody was going to be able to hit us below the belt more than we would do ourselves, that nobody could knock us down further. Nobody could have a lower opinion of us than we have of ourselves at one point, and
Strange
we got
comfort in that.
Yeah, there was definitely, and we did get knocked down, and we did have some nasty things. And when the first record came out, there was a lot of, there wasn't a ton of press because it was so insignificant when it first, it went to like the 99-cent cutout bins quite quick before it kind of had like this quick, resuscitation or something. And the few little reviews that people would do at the end of magazines would usually say something, about us being sort of a Pixies light or whatever, not having very much substance or this or that or whatever. And it never really, for me, I was like, that's the best you got, like, so, and I also, and still am to this day, when people are critical of my work, I can usually see what they're critical of and kind of go, okay, like I get that point of view, and I can usually kind of find balance in there for me, so.
Nice. Well, I think that's exactly it. What was so powerful for me and my group of friends is we were the same kind of thing. We didn't really fit in with everyone. We weren't going to the cool parties. And when you guys all came out, and it kind of like gave us something to center around. And I can remember going to the high school talent show, and the like seniors were playing. They had a band, they were playing, and we were just starting our band, and they did the Sweater Song. And we were like, whoa, like there's people like us. They get it too, And like, and it was just, I think a lot of the friend groups we formed were like based on a lot of those things where we kind of like, it was like all the people that didn't fit in anywhere else kind of came together. And the records you guys put out were huge for us. I mean, the Rentals was like the first time I ever heard of a Moog synthesizer, the Return of the Rentals, which is such a great first album name. Had me like looking for the original album,
Oh my God. Well, that came out of like this sense of humor that Tom Grimley, who produced the first record, and I kind of helped him with that a bit. But he was really the force of nature on that record. The two main keyboards we used on that first record were keyboards that he just had in his studio, which were a Moog Source and a Moog Opus 3. But Return of the Rentals came from, we decided we had come up with this idea that that the Rentals were already a band, and that they were like this. We sent out a legit press release when the first record came out, saying that the Rentals were a band that were from the Czech Republic, and when communism sort of overran Czechoslovakia and they put political prisoners away, the Rentals were one of the groups that were put away in prison, were political prisoners. And when the fall of the Berlin Wall happened, we were,
that's so funny.
We were let go. We were freed. And which is like kind of astonishing to think that like a major record label would let us do it. But people in those days were just like, we don't know what to do. Everybody, Weezer was very similar with our record company at the time. They were coming out of an era before Nirvana of like heavy metal dominance, where they really had there was a formula to everything, with when, eventually with heavy metal, where they're like, oh, you just have to do steps A, B, and C, and you can have a hit, record. If your guys look, a particular way, and they have a ballad be the third song on the record, and they do all, whatever, all these things, all these like tropes of heavy metal stuff, right? You got to have your Sweet Child of Mine as track 3 or whatever, and you got to, or your Every Rose Has Its Thorn and whatever, all these sort of things. And then I think when Nirvana came along, it really pulled the rug out of from under everybody, and for maybe a period of like, I don't know how long it lasted, maybe 5-10 years, maybe 5 years only. They just seemed to be like, we have no idea. What do you guys think? And so there was never really like the record industry didn't impose any kind of confidence on you. Like they felt very like, oh, we don't know, like, what do you think? And any kind of decision we would make, they're like, is that cool? We don't, they just didn't they didn't kind of go, you need to do this and you need to do that. And you need to, the video needs to be like this and that, and whatever. And so when Return of the Rentals came out, and we're like, we're going to tell everybody that we're political prisoners from Czechoslovakia, they were like, is that cool? Is that
that's the kids are into?
Yeah, okay, and so we did that, and basically saying that Return of the Rentals was us returning from, we've been in prison for so many years, and now we're fine, we're back, and this sort of this group with a tiny following in Czechoslovakia is like whatever. So that was the whole idea of Return of the Rentals, and had nothing to, like, people always said to me, it's like returning your rentals to Blockbuster or something like that, back in when video stores were around. But it was actually just that story. So
yeah, I remember looking for the first album. You didn't have the internet back then, and we figured we just weren't cool enough to know that there was an original album. You know what I mean? So. Yeah,
it was definitely confusing for folks, and I was given Madonna's phone number because the Return of the Rentals and the 7 More Minutes were both on her label on Maverick. Right? Yeah, and when we were doing that stuff, they gave me her fax number because I said, "Oh, I want to tell her thanks for putting us on the label," and or whatever. She had we had no direct sort of communications with her, but they gave me her fax number, and so I might have done this with Carl. Who would be up to these. Carl is like the kind of 5th member of Weezer. And we would get up to just really stupid ideas all the time. And one of them was to fax Madonna as if we were that Czechoslovakian band, basically saying, thank you for bringing us to your country, kind of like a Yakov Smirnoff, if you know who that is, like this comedian from the 80s, like, what a country, and so we were like, I can't remember, but we had faxed her multiple times, we feel so privileged to be in your country, whatever. It was so dumb. And then we think we did it twice, and we tried it a 3rd time and it was blocked, or whatever. And it was so dumb. It wasn't like mean spirit or anything. It was just being like, we're just a bunch of morons. And I met her when we went to the MTV Music Awards for Buddy Holly, and she was Rivers didn't go to the awards, and Pat didn't go to the awards, and so we were able to give our tickets and their +1s away to our high school friends and stuff. And so at some point we were early on in the festivities, and somebody said, hey, Madonna wants to just say hello. Will you come over and say hi to her? And so I followed this guy and went down, to the front row of the thing and talked to her. And in the background were all my these high school friends, and they were losing their shit, what the hell's going, with the surreal aspect of that how that would have felt for them and for me as well. And she just said, I just wanted to say, welcome to the label. And I'm so excited that, that you're working with us. And I'm really happy that I'm your boss or something like that. And it was just like that, it was just such a like wonderfully ridiculous and surreal moment, and I remember asking her if she was going to be a good boss, and she said she would be or whatever. And I said, thanks, boss. And like went back to my seat, and so anyways, it was funny memory lane stuff with that, but
yeah, I can imagine that.
I believe I accepted the award for Buddy Holly as that Czechoslovakian character.
In character, this is a vaguely familiar story.
Yeah. It was so like, and of course, like it's everything with the Rentals and Weezer and all the, it's all like you would have been with your friends in high school or your friends in your first bands. It's just like inside jokes upon inside jokes upon inside jokes that aren't going to land with anybody in a general public sense, and we certainly didn't have the media training to know whatever we just did these things that would just land with a thud and just be.
Well, I think the spirit of that comes through though. Like when people are having a good time, and that's kind of contagious. People pick up on that energy and they enjoy that quite a bit.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you a bit about like this. You've collaborated with so many people, and this kind of like friends thing. I don't know if I have the picture exactly right, but I always kind of thought of the Rentals as like it's your thing and all your friends. It's like this kind of fluid thing with lots of collaborations.
Sure, it's absolutely that, and that's a nice happy accident from the. It wasn't conceived that way, but it's a nice happy accident with the name of the band that it just turned out that way. To everybody be in some sort of temporary kind of
like
situation. Yeah, being Rentals, and yeah, I mean, I guess that's a fine way to put it. Just like we were talking about early on about the relationship with a photographer, with their subject, with the lighting thing. I've always felt like it didn't make sense for me to ever think of it as a solo effort, because you're really dependent on all these, and you want all, you're the part that makes it something you want to live in for so long. These albums usually take me quite a bit of time is due to those collaborations. And there's, I mean, certainly with this album, like I told you, I left it up to Nick to choose the songs. So I'm not leading this album, certainly the most I've let go of the reins on micromanaging and making sure that I conduct every tiny detail. But even on the big details, like what songs are we going to put on the album, I left that to him mainly because I wanted to make sure I am just like beside myself with like gratefulness to be able to work with him, because I'm a huge, huge fan of Nick's. And I just wanted to make sure that it was going to be something that ultimately he was proud of, because I knew he usually works on more abstract things. And so I wanted to make sure it was whatever he was doing, he wasn't having to swallow a pill that this is something that I don't particularly want. I'm going to contribute, but it's, I'm kind of grinding my teeth or whatever, biting my lip or whatever you want to say. So I just thought if he's empowered to make the decisions of what we do, then at least he'll have ownership over, these are the songs that you're connecting with. These are the songs. So a lot of maybe the common theme or feeling, not theme, but the common just like feeling of the album that kind of binds everything together is because they're chosen by him and things that resonate with his tastes. So they're unified from that. And of course, that's like, that alone makes it one big reason not to call, something like this like a solo record or an individual effort. It's so dependent on those contributions and how they color things. And so.
Well, I guess an important part of collaborating is not to let any egos get too big and too much in the way, because you want ownership. You want to feel like you're a part of it if you're working on something. Otherwise, why are you working on it? You want to put your point of view in.
Yeah, I mean, I think, it's one thing I'm just starting to learn now with the Q36, which is the name of this record. It is definitely the most I've ever let go of the reins, and kind of, opened up to, like I said, to not like perfectly frame every moment the way that I want you to see it or hear it. That's a good example of that is working with Dave Fridman, because I knew that if we both, Dave worked on Pinkerton ages ago, and whenever towards the end of the album, he wasn't the main engineer on the album, but he worked for a couple of weeks towards the end of it. Basically, because he worked on Pinkerton basically because the engineer that we worked with, a good friend of mine, Joe Barisi, he did the majority of the recording for Pinkerton. We kept telling him, hey, can we make it sound more like, and we would reference all of these Fridman recordings, mainly Flaming Lips albums from Cloud Taste Metallic and Transmissions from a Satellite Heart. And we kept bugging him to like, can't we fuck this up a little bit more and, distort this a little bit more and make this a little bit more ragged or whatever, like Dave would do. And eventually he said, just fucking call Dave then. And I think he called Dave for us and basically said, hey, these guys won't stop bugging me about trying to get this album to sound like it was a Dave Fridman record. So why don't you come out here and, work with them? And he told me that while we were mixing this album, and it made me laugh. So since then, we have been like in this like very like sporadic touch with each other over the years, and kind of said, oh, one day we're gonna, we have to work on something together. But to be honest, like I don't think he's such a force of nature, Dave, that it's like you don't want to step into the ring with him unless you're strong enough to to be able to stand toe to toe with him, because he has such a stamp and such a presence, and he's gonna. So you have to be at like at least for myself, I had to be at a place where I know that I could let go of the reins to some degree in there, but also be able to stand up and fight for what it is that we were trying to accomplish, because I had a good sense of where I wanted it to go, and that's why I was bringing it to him. And I like a little bit of, not mean spirited stuff, but I like a little like intellectual discourse and a little tug and pull of like of trying to understand why he's making the choices he's making, or why it's important that we implement certain things that I want to do, and if I hadn't been strong enough, it had been the record prior, he would have just ran roughshod right over me, and I would just, whatever, just been like, oh fuck, I'm just going to get out of the way. But I felt like with this album, I felt at a place where it's like, okay, I can actually be in the room with Dave and whatever, get into it, have it out.
Well, it's cool you can have that balance that, like kind of when to stand up and when to let go. I find it kind of interesting. Like you said, you let go of the reins more than ever. Yet you also said this is probably your most expressive album.
Right. Yeah. And I think that, I mean, those, that's one of those life irony things, you know. The more you let go, the more, you're able to be yourself. The more, the more I put the subject matter about other people's stories, the more you can like inhabit it and feel it and be more emotional about it, because you have a little distance from it, and then therefore it becomes more personal, and it has nothing to do with you. You're singing about a character that the guy from The Exorcist wrote, and so it's there's like there's not a moment in those lyrics that is my particular story. It's not trying to weave my story into his story, but it's just inhabiting his story and then being able to really kind of see like why you connect with the character. And yeah, so I mean, I think that, and that goes with this, with mixing this album, is with working with Dave, is, we had some very funny moments where, he would just turn around his swivel chair. He one thing that for production people that is interesting about him is that people wouldn't think, because his records are considered to be so loud. That's like a common way that people will write about his. If you're a writer for Pitchfork, you've probably written that, I don't know, whatever, his albums are too crushed or too loud or too slammed or whatever you want to use to describe it. And the truth is he mixes at the quietest sound I've ever heard anybody mix at. Yeah. He's like, there are times when I've been in the room with him where I can't even barely tell that there's anything playing. He's like sitting very close to these, his monitors, and listening at the pin drop levels, like just like a whisper, it's fascinating. And sometimes he would turn around and say, well, how do you feel about this or that? And I'd say, huh? Like, is there a fucking song playing? And that kind of thing. And so it's pretty incredible. And there was times when he would swivel his chair around and he would go, he's a man of very, very, very few words. I love him to death. But he's like, can be like monosyllabic, I think is the way to say it. And just say, whatever, just kind of, yeah, or whatever, and just go on and move on. And, he would turn around in his chair. Sometimes he'd be like, when this is after I brought him my notes on a particular mix or something, and he would just say, I just don't work this way, and then he would like, turn his chair around. And that's all he would say. And he'd go back to work and it's like, okay, how do you feel about that? And I might come back, well, and I would talk about the orchestration of something or arrangement or whatever. And he just go, oh God, I just don't work this way. And he would turn around and go back to it. At some point I just broke, and I was just like, Jesus Christ, Dave, you keep turning around telling me, you never work this way. What the fuck does that mean? And he basically described to me that, that he feels that he thinks he doesn't think about things in minute details at all. And that he thinks of just the overall feeling of is what his job is. Like, just let me get the vibe across, and then all the other stuff is totally insignificant, whether this is louder or that is louder, or you can properly hear some little intricate guitar part or some keyboard part or whatever. And so when he told me that, I was like, well, the only thing I could tell him, and I think this really changed our relationship and helped helped the album a great deal, was saying, like, is basically telling him, if I thought like he thought and I worked in the way that he worked, because I'm literally looking at the song, breaking it down from bar to bar, arrange like very very minutia level things with arrangement and I do a lot of layering with, if Nick's going to play something on the guitar, that it will be layered with a synthesizer, which will be layered with a vocal that's distorted, so you can't tell if it's a guitar or a synthesizer or a vocal or whatever. And so there'll be like sort of blends in there that I'm very specific about, and things like that. And I basically told him, well, if I thought like you thought, and I was a big vibe person, why would I come to you? Like, I'm here because you don't think like me. And that's what I'm interested in, is that place between those two things, and that we can serve each other well. And maybe that's what I feel like our relationship was very special on the album. And I felt like that push and pull was really really special. And it wouldn't, if he would have been a super detail oriented person where he's worried about the tiniest little detail, it would take him forever to mix, like it takes me forever to make a record. That's one of the reasons it takes so long, because I will go down every conceivable path on the tiniest thing and then realize I'm not going to use that path at all and throw it away and start over again and try the next thing down a million different paths and then take that, throw it away. If you mix that way, we'd still be there mixing now, and so there's something like, he has a kind of a bold way of just sort of, throwing everything down, and, it has a mood and it has a feeling, but it may be, missing on certain sort of things. And then that kind of makes me go, okay, what are you willing to fight for? And what are you, and what is important? And getting back to that analytical thing of just going, well, what is important in the song? What's whatever. And there's certainly things on the record that are done absolutely his way. Everything on the record is a collaboration between the two of us, but there's certain things where I let go of the reins more, and certain things where I said, no, I need to stand on this hill, and there's a reason for whatever the thing might be. There's a reason that this section is arranged the way it is. And in some things he's like, I'm throwing all this shit away that's here. I think of this song that's coming out next, there was a bunch of things of Nick's that he was like, it's overstuffed, not because Nick did it that way, but because I arranged it that way. And he just we yank stuff out of it and just go, well, in the trash with this and that and whatever. And and those moments are some of the best moments on the album. So
that's a cool kind of yin yang you got going, because it's so easy to lose sight of the big vibe, the overall picture, when you're going down the little detail rabbit holes. You kind of not even hearing the whole song anymore.
Yeah, I think mixers in general are used to that, because every band is like, takes in their first album or the whatever, and they're like, this is their baby and this is their thing, and they're like, oh, can I put my little bass fill up a little bit, and whatever, and that kind of stuff. And on the first Weezer record, like, we had a kind of idea about which is the things that mark the difference between the two albums, is that we had an idea that the bass on the first album was supposed to be essentially, except for a couple songs, like indistinguishable from the guitars, that it was just like essentially another string on the guitar that was being played along with it. So all these eighth notes that go along with the eighth notes of the guitars, but there's no harmony in it or anything. It's just like these like very basic things and they mixed it that way. So you could, it's not something that ever, it's intentional to not have it ever stick out. And it's just supposed to be this, like, we had this idea of both guitars and the bass being just a big monolith of like, boom, like this is one sound,
really thick sound.
Yeah, one really thick sound where you can't really tell. You can't, whatever. You can't break the things apart. And then past that, the second record we made together, it was a completely different thing of wanting it to be unbridled and wanting it to just like, whatever, just like be completely less unified, sloppier sort of thing, which was just a complete, which was just a different expression.
Yeah, I
So
love the
I
bass
can
playing on
understand.
that record. I mean, the bass kind of
Thank you.
meanders and it really fills and drives things.
Oh,
It's
thank you so much. It was like, going into the first record, we played a show once a week, every week. That was the sort of kind of ethos we had or whatever. It was like, we're not going to falter from this. But I hadn't, I had been so on and off with playing bass. I barely took it as seriously as I should have. I was never really, I was not a very good student in junior high school or high school or anything. And that kind of bled into how I approached the bass, unfortunately. So on the first record, I just had about a year under my belt of like really, the Weezer was my first actual band. And so I had like definitely no confidence, but by the time we got to Pinkerton, we had toured that record over and over and over and over and over again. We must have toured just the US like 8 times or something like that. And then some European things. And so by the time we got through that with that stuff, everybody was just through playing so much, was in a much more kind of confident place, about like who we were as, individuals and what that meant as a whole and all that kind of thing.
Sure. Yeah. All that practice.
But anyways, that was such a sidetrack, but I always think of like, mixing engineers, of having like the 4 guys or women or whatever in the band standing behind them going, could you put up my little thing here or whatever. So they're used to being annoyed to death about what each band member thinks or what each producer thinks of, I worked, for years on this and there's and they're hearing it without any of that investment of time. So they're just hearing it as a, what comes across to them. So they're used to that. Dave is certainly used to that, but I think he has such a reputation and people are so in awe of him that the people that work with him really want to work with him. And he only works with the people that he wants to work with. There was definitely an album at one point I thought maybe this is the album that we should work on, and he was like, nah. So it was, even with a long history between us, I was like, nah, that's not the record for me. So he's used to that. But I think that people come to him in such awe that he can run them over as well. Right. He certainly has the power that where people will just go, okay, you just let him do, because he is like very concise with his verbiage, and he doesn't speak very much, and you can just go, okay, that's what. So it took us a little bit to find a way to like communicate and have dialogue, and I ended up having to go back with our couple of the early mixes we did and redo them because we had found such a better rhythm by the end.
That's cool. Yeah, when I was doing a little research for this talk, looking up Dave Fridman, and I'm like, damn, he's the guy that made like all my favorite drum sounds. Looking at like Pinkerton and Yoshimi, and there was just so many good albums with such like huge, monster, awesome drum sounds. It's
well,
cool to see that connection. It's so funny that he does it so quietly.
The drummer from the Flaming Lips to me is like, is the biological son of John Bonham, So it's like when I hear, especially those like kind of earlier records or whatever, I really hear him as being like blood related to Bonham. And so much of that, not to say that Dave doesn't have a big thing to do with that, but so much of that I think comes from Steven just being such a monster. It's like I desperately wanted him to play drums on the second Rentals record, And I think he was just like, who the fuck is this guy? I don't know, whatever. And it didn't even make it, we didn't make it past first base or anything, I'm sure I just struck out completely on that. And Weezer probably didn't have like the coolest reputation amongst people like, in bands like the Flaming Lips or whatever. But I like when as Led Zeppelin did the recordings at like the O2 Arena or something like that. They did a reunion years ago, like years and years ago. And they had Bonham's son play drums, and they put it like they made a live album and video out of it and everything. And I always thought it was like just absolutely like such a shame that it was not. I mean, John Bonham's son is a perfectly competent drummer, but like Stephen is John Bonham to me. Like he's the way he's able to play that. There's that particular like way a drum set can open up only when certain drummers play it, where it's like it's just something about a particular feel or the way that they attack things, where it's just like the whole drum kit can go, one drummer can sit down and play and it sounds a certain way, and then another drummer sitting in that same kit and the whole thing just like opens up into this big wide thing. And he has that fucking in spades. I saw him on I guess it was Yoshimi, and where they were doing almost everything with drum machines, and then in the middle of the set he came out and played, like he sat behind, it had a drum set up, but most of the time he was playing keyboards or whatever, second guitar maybe, I don't remember, but in the middle of the set he played for like 4 songs, and it was just like the most fucking glorious thing I'd ever heard. Just chills. I'm getting chills now thinking about the way his drums sounded that night. Just like, whatever, just give it up. Like he's a god to me, and so Dave's pretty fortunate to be recording that dude on all those records. Right. But anyways, Dave is ridiculously amazing,
Now, when I listen to like the Return of the Rentals first record, and I'd say even 7 more minutes to two of my favorite records, honestly, period. But it's like clear, like, it's more like a band, right? Like it's more straightforward. You can almost imagine how maybe you put it together. But in the new record, Q36, I'm curious, like, what are you showing up with? What are you bringing? Because this is a much more dense, layered project. It doesn't sound. I mean. It doesn't sound like a band as much. It sounds like a band. You know what I'm saying though? Like it's obviously.
I do. Yes.
So I'm curious, like what are you starting with? How does this process work?
Well, as I told you in the beginning of our conversation, when I was working on it, my first thing was just to write 50 songs. And what that meant for me was like seeing them all the way through, was to say a song's not written until you actually sign off and say, okay, this is the structure, this is the tempo, these are the lyrics, these are the melodies, these are the chords, guitar, whatever, just on a scratch guitar, or maybe on a scratch keyboard or whatever. But the meat and potatoes of it is there as far as that goes. And if it can work in that way and hold your attention, then it should be pretty indestructible. That's at least the hope. And so, I imagine when it was played for Nick, it would have just been no backing vocals or anything, but maybe me approximating some scratch little thing. Just one vocal, some scratch guitars, and probably a couple keyboards just for mood purposes to go, okay, it's kind of in this general kind of feeling, because keyboards are able to give you set a little more tone than just a scratch thing. And so probably I would have played it to him in that way. And then I basically told him from that point forward, it started with him, and we only focused on what he was doing. And then from there, I started figuring out, okay, now how, once I understand what his arrangement is, then I'm able to figure out what I'm taking out and what I need to add and all those kinds of things. The intention of this record was that if Nick was going to do it, Dave was going to do it. So the songs were recorded and arranged in a way that we knew that we were going to end up in Friedman's hands. So the songs are kind of constructed in a way and arranged in a way with him in mind. So we're thinking, okay, ultimately we're going to be with Dave. And we have a sense of kind of, just a broad sense of like how Dave approaches his mixes from being fans of his work. So we're thinking about it that way. One thing, this is like something about working with Nick. The only work that we did together was listening. We never were in the same room together. So it's you said it doesn't sound like a band. That's partially why, and it's not supposed to. So Nick worked on all of the music in his own little home studio, and that was one of those things. That was the first person I've ever worked with like that, where it was completely, where there was no. We weren't there. I wasn't sitting shoulder to shoulder with that person in the room, kind of going through everything and trying to convey, oh, I think we should go here, and kind of, so
letting go of the reins.
So letting go of the reins. And that was that thing when I wasn't sure when he told me at the very beginning, that's how he wanted to work. So a funny thing that I've always had in my mind is, oh man, what if he didn't play guitar on this record? What if it's actually like his roommate? Because I have no idea. I have no visual proof. I have no photographs. I have no video. I have, no nothing. So, maybe he has
the job.
maybe he outsourced, and maybe he has an apprentice or something, a Zinner apprentice. And that's always made me laugh, that part of it, that thought of like, I'm telling everybody Nick's on this record, but maybe it's not. But of course you hear it, and it couldn't be anybody else. But that was a part of letting go of the reins with it, was that immediately. So when the first time he came over to my studio, which is where I'm at now, we listened to 25 songs, and then it was like, all right, we're maxed out. So he said, okay, I'll come back and listen to another 25, at another time. Like, let's get through this first part, and then we'll come back. And once we've got like halfway through the record, then we'll figure out then we'll have a better sense of what the record needs. So we'll listen to the next 25 songs later. So we did that. And the one thing that we wanted to do is, I had like this, the first song we put out was the song we talked about earlier, Elon Musk Is Making Me Sad. And I wanted that. The weird thing was, I knew that I wanted Nick to be on the whole record, and I knew that we wanted it to end up with Dave. But like that song, because Elon was in the news so much at that point, it was one of those things where he was like, every day was a new Elon is doing this. Elon is doing that. Elon's sending somebody to Mars. Elon's saving this country. Elon is doing, whatever. Right. Elon's doing this with Teslas. He's doing this with SpaceX. He's doing this with, solar energy. He's doing all of that all at once, seemingly like it was just whatever. And that was the inspiration for, being one of the only like truly like, it's a fairy tale of a song. It's not, there's nothing literal about it, but it's still a very personal thing. And it's because of all of those accomplishments that's what inspired the sentiment,
Mm-hmm.
And I had played it for my friends in Manchester Orchestra. I was putting them up. They were here doing the Swiss Army Man soundtrack, or Swiss Army Man. Yeah, I think that's the name of the movie. And I played them an earlier version of the song right before I played it for Nick, and they said it was really self-deprecating, and it was really like Elon's kicking the crap out of me, kind of, and it didn't really have any other point than that. And they said, you got to look into it, but I'm sure at some point in your two timelines, he would have liked to have switched places with you, given the choice. And so that was sort of the impetus for the lyrics. And so when I gave it to Nick, there was like an urgency of like, we need to get the song out now, no matter when the record is done, no matter when we're done with whatever we got to do, no matter when we can eventually work with Dave, we need this song out, and we want it out now. And it was giving me like anxiety at a pretty high level, because I kept thinking there's going to be like 10 Elon Musk songs to come out, because he's just so ever present, and I kept thinking of like, whatever. I kept thinking it was going to be, this artist or that artist or somebody, or because he's so universal, and his name is fascinating. It's a wonderful name to just sing, and it's great. It's got you can grab onto it really easy, and I just was like, oh, it's definitely happening. So we need this. Like, I just want it out, and I want it, not that we're the first people to ever write an Elon Musk song, but I just didn't want it to be like the 50th, and I didn't want the record to come out and be like, oh my God, and here we go with another fucking Elon Musk song, and so we just put that out, and Dave mixed it almost immediately. And Nick recorded it, his guitar part, maybe a half hour after he left our first listening session. He just said, send me that song, and when I get home, I'll do it. And like an hour later, he sent me the tracks back. And it was immediately apparent of like, whatever he's doing here is way more interesting and way cooler than anything I would have suggested. And it's just, I was like, just the idea of him being on his own was like, I need to get myself out of the way so he can do Zinner like shit, that I'm not micromanaging and trying to like guide him down, because whatever it would be, I would probably be taking something out of what makes him him, and I've definitely done that with other musicians that I've worked with, where I've kind of been over analyzing everything, and it kind of removes some of their soul, and I just did not want that with him. So, and it was very apparent with that song. I was like, fuck. And the solo of that song just like really gave me the chills, and or whatever you want to call it, instrumental passage or something. And so whatever, I'm babbling like crazy, but that was my lesson with Nick, of like, with some people, some people are going to want guidance and help, and be able to paint the picture for them. And I did that to a degree with him. I would kind of I might tell him like things that aren't song related, but maybe like, this song should sound like Blade Runner or something, or whatever, or that's how I'm thinking about it. You can do what you want with it. I'm thinking about this, or I'm thinking about it, or like, I'm thinking about the song, like this story I heard, or something, like just some kind of like launch point of how to get into it, but not telling them, specifically, oh, I want you to play this melody or that melody, or whatever.
Right, let them interpret some abstract idea.
Yeah, well, he's particularly suited to that, because he most often works in abstract things. I mean, the AES are like the most pop thing that he does. Most of the stuff that I hear him do, I mean, he does shit all over the map. He has like he has a Black Sabbath cover band that he does with a friend of mine. So he does things like that, but he'll also do like really abstract like film scoring and things like that, and I think of him as that kind of person. That's why I was not really hopeful that he would actually be interested in doing the record in the first place, because I thought it would be a little too square for him, or a little too just like, I don't know, whatever, straight songs or something.
Right. But it works well with the kind of spacey vibe, because I think his stuff is.
If you need a dude to take you to outer space, he's the dude. I mean, that's why I looked down a bunch of different paths before we ended up working together, of just kind of seeing like, how should this go, and kind of talking to different friends about maybe we could collaborate on this together. I had a bunch of different thoughts and tried a bunch of different ideas before figuring out like, oh, of course, like just the simple question of like, who is the person that can take me to outer space, or take these songs to outer space, or, who's the person that can like build worlds, I feel like I'm about to launch into the Candyman, but he's the guy. He's the guy that can. That's what he's so amazing at. He's so amazing at like creating some kind of atmosphere where you really feel like you're in some other place, and it can just like transport you. The AAS stuff does that to me all the time. I don't know. It's an abstract feeling, but it's not here. It's not like, it's a very dreamy sort of place that he takes me to, and that I connect with,
Yeah. I mean, the AAS, just the way he fills space with just a drummer.
It's incredible.
And a singer.
It's fucking incredible. Yeah. Whenever I see them live, it's like, that's incredible. This is all coming that he's doing that he's building, he's like constructing worlds for people to like kind of, for Karen to live in and everything. And we just yesterday, because of the coronavirus stuff, we ended up shifting our release schedule, releasing one song. For people that don't know, we're releasing one song from this record, which is a double record, every 2 weeks. But when this situation came, we didn't even know. We didn't know a bunch of different things about, like everybody kind of scrambling for answers. Right. So we decided to like take 2 weeks off from our schedule, and we decided to like, we had some other things that we had like backburnered that were already done. And one was this an EP for the song Forgotten Astronaut, which is another mix a different mix that Friedman did of just my acoustic guitars and my vocal in the choir. And then 2 mixes that I did, which like just completely focus on Nick. And I call those Z36 mixes because they kind of are Zinner-centric mixes, where I really just want to share, because the album is quite layered and quite heavy with dense arrangements. You can't always, appreciate like all the things that these kind of big worlds that he's creating. Sometimes they get lost underneath like all of the percussion and drum elements sometimes. So I've made a series of mixes that are just like basically my synthesizers and Nick's guitars, and then sometimes with vocals, sometimes not. And yesterday we focused on one of those, just on social media, on like Instagram and Twitter and that kind of stuff, just kind of sharing those. And you can hear those on anywhere, like you stream music, the EP's out. Mm-hmm. So it's called Q36 Special Feature. And it's just 4 different versions of Forgotten Astronaut, and 2 of them are like heavily created around Nick's contributions.
That's cool that you have all that material to work with, and you can just reimagine it just like that.
Oh man, I love it. Like there's his part that was like this record took a long time. Pretty much all the music that I write takes a long time. I was a bad student when I was in junior high school, and I'm a bad student now. I've never been, I have my process, and I've surrendered to it a long time ago. But working with him meant that I was going to be in this record took 4 or 5 years to make. And being with him meant that I could living in his worlds that he was creating was just like such a pleasurable thing, just to I could, be working on some other piece of arrangement and then just shut everything off and only listen to his parts and just go, this is just nice being here a while. And honestly, I wish I had done more of that, featured him more in the record like that than we did. But maybe on some future project together, we can do something like that where it's more revolving just around his, his world building.
Yeah. Well, you got the EP, the kind of remix idea is pretty cool.
Yeah. And it doesn't work with every song, and we've done a few of them, and they're, you can see them on YouTube if you just kind of look up the Rentals and look up, anything with Q36 on it will bring you to different things. And if you ever see anything that says Z36, it will be Zinner land,
Nice. What kind of synths were you using on this? Are you going finicky old analog stuff, or?
Yeah, I mean, I pretty much that's. So I used not a lot of different synthesizers. In the past, I have a friend has a music store here, and they would always have like finicky old synthesizers, like you said, and I would just borrow them from him because there'd be like these fucking massive, I don't know, God knows how much they weigh and how much space they take up. These massive old like Oberheims and shit like that. And I just borrow them for whatever song I was working on and return them, and just like, whatever, just use them for
cool
kind of get some cool things out of them and be like, I can't have, my house is not that big. So I was like, I can't have like 10,000 synthesizers lying around. But I used the synthesizer I've used basically on every Rentals record, the Source, a lot. I used 2 different Junos, a Juno 106, which is super common, and the JX3P, which I share a property with this person. This person I used to share the property with was leaving and was like, "Hey, I have this keyboard. You should try it out." And that's I got that from him as a parting gift, and I love that keyboard. It's great. I like that. I prefer it over the 106 personally because it just is. It has a little like a little side piece that you add to it. That's it's got all the filters. 200
gives you
or
all the knobs.
Gives you all the filters and the knobs and whatever. And it's fun and it's like interactive and it feels. That's something that the Source isn't great at. And even though the Rentals are known for the Source, it's like really the primary synth that's throughout all our records. It's not a very engaging instrument as far as wanting to like go from one place to another because it's one knob and you have to kind of go through the touchpad kind of thing. And it's not intuitive at all, but it's amazing sounding, but it's not something that, that screams out, "Hey, play with me." It's just, whatever. You can go from this sound to that sound like easy peasy. So that JP3X or whatever, JX or whatever. All my numbers are scrambled. That one was wonderful for that. Like, just you can go from one place to another like that, and it's just like really fun. And I don't save anything ever. I just kind of whatever. I just like you just go there and just let it rip and whatever. And then the other keyboard that I used was the modern. A Sub 37, the modern Moog. And how I feel about that keyboard is it's even more so fun like that, where you can get from one thing to another really quick just by turning one knob and doing whatever. And it just engages you like really, it's really friendly in that way. It's like fuck, let's have some fun. And you end up doing all, it's like that. And I love the Sub 37 for that. It's a little, I always felt it feels like a little like, it's the only downside of it to me. It's very slight, but it's like that it can feel, like if you buy a brand new guitar, if you buy like a brand new Fender that's right off of the shelf or something, it always feels a little stiff. Like it might be amazing. It might have like amazing action and it might, whatever, have great pickups and do all this, but it still feels a little stiff. And I think the Sub 37 can feel a little, it's got a tinge of that where it can feel like a little new,
It's
and maybe it's
stable.
Yeah, it's real stable. And the Source, I've had the Sources for 25 years now. So I have two of them. And they're loosey goosey, but they're not like, they still hold their pitch and everything. But the patches have all sorts of weird character and noise and stuff that's like, they're never consistent, and that's kind of the beauty of it, I guess.
And the curse. It's the beauty and the curse.
Yeah, no, I love it. I'm happy as hell that that was the synthesizer that happened to be in Tom Grimley's studio that day. But I also use a Farfisa quite a bit that I have. I have a very beautiful looking tan looking Farfisa. I don't know what particular model it is, but it's pretty great sounding for some of those organy kind of things. And I have two Elka synthesizers for strings and also for organs and stuff. And I love the one Elka does one sound and it does like two sounds. One sound sucks and the other sounds really good. So basically it's like, if you want this particular Gary Newman kind of eurythmic sort of string sound, like you're like, okay, that's cool.
The one.
but it takes up a big amount of space and it just does this one. It's very, very, very limited. And it's very hard to manipulate in any way that makes it sound like anything else either. It just kind of sounds like it sounds. And it's like, okay, well, you want that thing. So I sparingly use that a little bit. But my friend, he sent me a picture of this other Elka. And I was just like, God, that's beautiful. It's just like this, like, it just looks like a piece of furniture. It's so nice. And out of nowhere, when we were starting this record, he was like, hey, I have a gift I want to send to you. And he sent me the keyboard out of the, whatever, having good friends.
Yeah.
I was like, hell yes. Yeah, but his name's John Maloof. He's the guy that discovered this photographer, Vivian Meyer. And I'm a huge fan of his film that he made about Vivian. And we've been friends ever since meeting some years ago, and he is a big not thrift store, but like going to all sorts of markets and just finding all sorts of weird, unique things. And he found this Elka that's just like pretty amazing. We use that quite a bit, and I think that's it as far as keyboards. Just really those, and then Nick did some things, and I don't know what those things are. And ultimately, a lot of Nick's keyboard stuff, he didn't do a ton. It's almost all guitar. But the stuff that he did do, I'm like, oh, man, like, he's just the coolest human being there is. And I'm always like, whenever I hear it's like, oh, that's how he approaches keyboards. That's like much more interesting than what I'm doing. Or it's just much more, it's him, I should say.
Yeah.
And I'm more interested in that. But he would do some weird stuff. He'd sample my voice and turn my voice into keyboard parts and make them into these really abstract, like just take like some O or something like that, and it'd just be whatever you hear all this fucking. I think that stuff is in ninth configuration. Some of his more abstract keyboard stuff.
There's a really cool end part. It's that kind of the outro of that song gets all weird and spacey, and
that part was very short originally. This is one of those Nick things. That part was really short. It was just like weird thing that I was like, what if it just went to this other feel, like just like had like a scene change of just like boom, and it was real short, and we did it and made that little I made that little part, and the first thing that Nick said to me is like, "Oh, that thing should go on forever." Like he's like, "That's my favorite part of the song." And so I made it like, I don't even know, like maybe 4-8 times longer than I had intended it to. And that's what's on the album now. And I'm still like, fuck, I wish it was 4 times longer than it is. Like, it's just because of the stuff that he created, it makes you want to live in that. It's one of those things where it's like, oh, he's creating this atmosphere. And we have friends of ours from this group called the String Quartet, is a string section, and they did some abstract cello and violin stuff that also kind of gives it some layers of depth and things like that. But yeah, I've been thinking of that part, thinking how I wish it had. I did make it quite a bit longer, but I could imagine it just being like, oh, that's a song unto it. That's 3 minutes of a world I'd want to live in by itself.
Yeah, for sure. Makes you want to put the song back on too, though. Makes you come back.
That's the
another hit.
Hopefully that's the case.
So we're in like the day of everyone's releasing singles, and maybe an EP is like a huge release, and albums are so small now, but you're doing a big double album. And the approach is pretty cool with it every 2 weeks, but you're really milking every single song through this hit record site. Is it hit record or is it hit record?
Yeah, that's how I say it. I call it hit record. I don't know. I'm sure that's right. I hope we've been working together for all this time. Yeah, that's like an interesting thing that happened right before we launched, because we had already had the idea that we were going to do it this way, with releasing a song every 2 weeks. It became out of that idea to use that kind of a release schedule, was just brought out of like a common frustration, I think most musicians, or that's just to say most creative people feel. If you've made a film, or if you've written a book, or if you've whatever, whatever you've done, the feeling at this time in our society is that, at the most, it's going to like be in our thoughts for a day, 2 days, something like that. And then we move on to whatever it is. And that could be if it's a full record, or if it's a single song, or if it's a book, or if it's a movie, or whatever. And, somebody makes a film, and they take all the time they do to raise the money to make the film, and find the actors, and get the right cinematographers, and do the lighting, and do all the shit. And then they get to it, and their movie is there. It's, for maybe a week, maybe 2 weeks in the theaters, and it's gone, and it's gone from your contemplative thoughts, and it's just erased. And that goes for even more so for music, with songs being so short and everything. So one of the things, we were looking for a home for this record, my manager and I, for a while after it was done. And we didn't have that much interest in general, I think, because of the weight of the record being this big double album and this kind of like full meal. It's not meant to be a little appetizer. It's meant to be a big 7-course thing. And the people that were interested in it were always saying, okay, well, we're interested in possibly releasing this record for you, but we're thinking, the second quarter or third quarter of next year. And we're going to need 6 months of time to like kind of work up to like doing the release and getting everything ready to go. And then we'll be released in the third quarter of 2021, let's say. And the thing that was so frustrating was like, okay, so we're going to do all this. We're going to go through like 6 months worth of first get out the end of this year. And then we're going to get all this prep to like get to this moment where we put out the first song and maybe get the record out, a month later or whatever. And it's only going to be in people's thoughts for like everybody else's stuff for a week, or 2 weeks if you're real lucky, and and it was just very frustrating to think, why do we need 6 months of time to lead up to this? And I just got to a point where I was like, kind of doing a little arg at the world and just going like, oh God, and at some point I called up my manager and I said, God, when this record is done, when this thing is finally seen its day and is over in 2 weeks, the next thing I do, I'm just going to release a song every 2 weeks and just celebrate that thing as best I can. And then just put out something else 2 weeks later. And as I was kind of ranting to him about it, I realized, oh, why don't you just do that right now? Why are you, talking about the thing that you want to do tomorrow? Why aren't you just doing it today? And so that was really the inspiration for the way that we released these songs. It was like, we have an album, it's done. Why don't we just do why don't we just do this thing on our own and just put out a song every 2 weeks and figure out we'll with my friends and people I haven't even met yet, we'll figure out what we can do within that 2 weeks to either make some visual companion to it or whatever, but we'll just do what's within our means. It's essentially all friends doing things just for the love of creating. And we kind of had that idea, and a friend of mine works at Hit Record, and he said, when I told him that was our plan, we had gone on this like big walk. And I told him, well, this is how we're, he's a friend of mine who's helped me out with rentals things throughout the history of the group. And I told him, no, this is how I'm planning on going about it. I was just like, basically I lost my mind and I was like, fuck it. I'm pulling the plug on looking for a home, and we're going to be the home, and we're just going to do it. And we're going to do it. And my feeling was like, I want to go now. Like, it was like, I don't know how much time from that first thought it was, but it wasn't long. It was maybe a month later that we were releasing songs. I just hit the boiling point and blew my lid and was just like, let's go. I don't even care if we have a publicist or a thing, or I don't even care if people even hear the first couple songs. It's just, let's just get going. Let's just do this thing and just stop over planning and stop doing whatever. Let's just jump in the ring, get in, whatever you want to call it, get in the pool, get ourselves wet. Let's just go. And so we did that. And I was telling my friend and about it, and he said, you should have my company over to listen to the album. I was doing listening sessions with record labels and people where I would have them come into my studio, and we put on all this sort of ambient kind of space videos and just have them listen to the whole album in one sitting, or both albums in one sitting. And so I had them over and basically told them our plan, that we were going to do this. And they explained to me what their community was like. And basically the Hit Record community, it was started by Joseph Gordon-Levitt, the actor. And the idea was that they were going to create this community where they would have just a series of prompts, basically like diving boards, to create something, just to go write a poem with that's about something blue, and you would just go, okay, it's just a little writing challenge. I'll write a poem that's about something blue. Maybe I'll write about a whale or a thing or whatever, or a bluebird or whatever you want to do. And the idea is it's just this big collaborative community, and people interact with each other and collaborate on each other's works. But once you're in the community, nobody can monetize on anything. So the community is a little bit of a utopian kind of idea of, we're here to create art for art's sake, and nobody can capitalize on it. So if I make a video and somebody does a drawing for it, or makes an animation for it or something, that thing has to live inside their community, and is not something that you can put on YouTube and make money off of, or that kind of thing. But they were saying, like, this album, the way you're releasing it, if you're going to follow through with this idea of releasing a song every 2 weeks, this is the perfect way to like, we'll take each song and you can give us ideas, or we'll give you ideas of little art challenges, little creative challenges that people can take from the song and use to create something new. And they explained it to me. For instance, on this song that's out this week is Forgotten Astronaut. And there's one lyric that says, and the arms of the ocean are stretched out open wide. So they take that lyric and they say, start a poem with the arms of the ocean are stretched out open wide. And you just take that and you can write as long or as little as you want to and write a poem, and you just post it and people will comment on it and that kind of thing. Or you could say, take that same line and say, take a photograph where the arms of the ocean are stretched out, and people will take photographs, well, especially now that we're all at home and kind of hidden away. They kind of go through their photographs they've taken over their life and will put up something that is that fits that lyric. And they told me about this, and I really thought, well, it can't hurt, like these people were very bright and had a lot of enthusiasm and seemed like genuinely decent people, which is always what you look for when you're the people you collaborate with. And they told me this, and I really did think it seemed like a little too Age of Aquarius, a little too utopian, a little too like perfect. I'm like, okay, but it can't hurt. So whatever, it will be a fun thing. And it'll be another way to do what we've been talking about this whole time, of saying like, this is another way to like let go of the reins a little bit and let people just have fun, whatever. And what they create doesn't have to represent you. It just has to, it's just an excuse to create more things and to maybe to help somebody that's got writer's block on that day. And it just gives them a little challenge to kind of get wipe the cobwebs off. Mm. So that was the idea. And they told it to me, and we started with whatever the first song was. And from the absolute get-go, I mean, these people are not fans I would say 99% are not people that are fans of Weezer or not fans of the Rentals or not fans of anything that I've created or been a part of. They're just creative people that are looking for an excuse to create. So right from the get-go, we had all of these contributions and all of these people coming in that like have, like I said, have no understanding or connection to our history. Like you were saying, you have a connection to maybe Weezer when you were in junior high school or high school or whatever. But these people are coming from just, oh, that's an interesting way to think of a photograph, or that's an interesting way to start a poem or a short story or a thing, whatever. And it has blown my mind. Like people, I just started doing it myself because that's not something I would be naturally inclined to like sign up and be a part of. And I just started contributing photographs for different prompts and doing things. But it's super easy. It's super easy to sign up, and it's super easy just to like, if you're a fan of the Rentals work, you can like go in there and just look up the Rentals, and there's hundreds and hundreds of prompts now that we've done just to like, get, like I said, get people to give them an excuse to write something or to take a picture of something or to create an animation, whatever. And it has been mind blowing. It's been just as utopian as he told me. It's been like one of the most positive things to come out of this. Every week there's like hundreds of contributions to things that we could never have seen coming from the songs. And it's been, I strongly encourage, just like, you don't even have to contribute to it, but just go there, go onto the site. You probably have to sign up with like an email or whatever. But once you go in, you can just like see all these people writing and taking photos and drawing and making videos and doing all sorts of stuff and they do a lot of voice acting, which is just work a line from a song and just say, read this out loud, and they'll take a lyric and they just read it out loud. And those have been things where, because all you need is your phone to do it. You just pick up your phone, record it, and then just post it. There'll be like 1,000 people that will read a particular lyric, and they'll do it in all kinds of different characters and different voices and different, and it's just, I'm not exactly sure of ultimately of the purpose, but I think it just helps you get out of your shell and kind of like, okay,
Well, that's a
I
big
did.
thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's kind of cool.
It's nice to see art inspire art, just this kind of endless creation that happens after one thing.
Yeah. It's real interesting. It's like I said, it's nothing I've always believed that, it's your job as the creative person to, I never liked the interactive stuff of, hey, hey guys, to have an idea for a song, or, remix our song or do whatever. I was never one of those people that's been into that, because I've always thought it's your job to say, this is how I feel. And I want you to, either you connect with it or you don't, but this is this is something that I'm standing by, and that, is something that is a work, this is a piece, and this is done. And that's where this record, that's where this relationship with Hit Record is interesting, because that part is true. We are saying this song is done. This album is done in its entirety. It's sequenced, it's mastered, it's mixed, it's done. It's a thing. It's a unified feeling. We've done our part. Now we're just letting other people take it apart to create new things, but it doesn't color the actual your initial intention. It's just an excuse as a diving board to create other things,
So an expanding universe.
Yeah, it is that, and I've been really beside myself, I guess is the thing to say, with what a successful thing it is. It was such a off the cuff thing when it happened, and I didn't put really any thought into it. We had this really one nice meeting. I played them the album, and then we just kind of jumped into this thing together, and it's been just tremendous. And the people that work there are like the best. Like, they're just focused, and they're like so encouraging without it being phony in any way. It just feels like we just, as each new song comes up, like maybe a day or two before the release, they say, hey, don't forget about this week. And then we start, kind of like knocking some ideas back around. And usually we come up with like 10 to 12 things around each song. And for photographs and writing and poetry and short stories and videos and all kinds of stuff, and voice acting and all those things. And it's just been wild. It's been absolutely a wild thing.
Yeah, it's a cool and kind of like pure way to generate interest around the album too, and to also inspire. I've never really seen anything like this before in a release, and it's refreshing, I think it's really cool.
That element of it, like I said, that's all of them, as far as just them having the energy and the and I was able to meet them there on that, say, okay, if you're in, let's go. let's do this. So it's been, and Joseph himself has been just incredible with just being, just being really supportive of the thing, and always kind of, even when it's stuff that doesn't pertain to them, they've been just very supportive of, the videos we're making with people that live outside of their community, because we are making videos for the general public, and we are doing certain things for the general public.
Yeah, well, I like that spirit in art. Sometimes it gets competitive, and I don't think it needs to be that way. And I think it's always nice when things come together and people work and collaborate and all that. It's nice.
Yeah, it's just
it's good for everyone.
Just it's the right people meeting each other at the right time too, mainly, And we've done that too. I guess the last thing we can talk about, which is very in line with that, which started before, and this may have inspired the Hit Record idea, or my friend to think of putting us together, was that one of the ideas, there's a graphic designer who I also like. I'm a fan of Nick's. I'm a fan of this particular artist. His name is Ivan Minsloff, and he did a tour poster for our last album. And it was the creative. It was right before we went on the road, and it was just a screen printed tour poster. And the album was called Lost in Alphaville, and I had told him it would be really cool if he designed a kind of a poster that was basically like a postcard that was for like a vacation postcard to like get away to this place, and make Alphaville a place. And it was a sci-fi theme that he chose to do, and get lost in Alphaville, that kind of thing. And we had such an easy time. He was so like incredible and quick, and just like he found the tone of the, like, oh, this is exactly what this should look like and feel like. And he did it so fast. I was like, God damn, that's incredible, because I'm so slow with creation. And he was just like, got it back to me right away. I was like, wow, is that on? Does that just feel exactly like the thing that was in my mind, and or beyond that, I should say. And when it came time to release a song every 2 weeks, I did the same thing with him. I had him come up, just the two of us, up to my studio and play him the whole double album, and told him when it was over, like, what I wanted him to do is that if he had the time to create a new design around every song, and we can make that design into whatever we felt like, a t-shirt or a tote bag or a hoodie or whatever it could be, or a baseball hat or a frisbee or a patch or a sticker or whatever it would be. But I said, let's just make a design for every song, and we'll go into it together as like partners, and we'll only have them on sale for the time that the song is, until the next song comes out. So they're basically available for 2 weeks only. So they're just these like weird little limited edition things. So it's like, there's a ninth configuration shirt, and it's available when the song is released, and it's gone by the time the next song is released. And we've just been partners through this whole process like that. And it's been very similar to the hit record thing, where it's like always up against the wire, always the last second. And we're like, oh shit, we have this song coming up, and we've got to, we've got the song Team Beat Cosmonaut coming up, and we've got to figure out what to do. And we'll just kind of, he'll send me some designs. And then the night before the song comes out, we're like, oh shit, here we go. And just kind of give him a couple of little thought, my 2 cents about it, and then make a couple adjustments when we put it out. And it's like been super like vibrant. It just feels like alive, because they're only available for those 2 weeks. And it feels just like, it doesn't matter if we sell 5 t-shirts or 100 t-shirts or 1 poster or 50. We don't even, neither one of us really care about it. We're just like, it's just kind of, in the way that the hit record is, it's like just an excuse to create something, and to use it as like a diving board. And I've told him the same thing that I told the hit record people, is like, whatever we do, it doesn't need to be literal. If you like a word in the song, you like a general feeling, or you like a particular lyric, just take that and, and it doesn't have to promote the band. It doesn't have to promote me. It doesn't, just create what you think this thing feels like,
Right. Cool. And again, it's the trust thing. And nothing like the power of an approaching deadline to get something going. Right?
Yeah, for sure. The only other project that I've done similar to this, which I think bored the piss out of everybody, because I did micromanage the hell out of it, and I made sure everything looked a certain way, and everything had like a real sameness to it, because I had my fingerprints on everything. Was this project in 2009 called Songs About Time. And we did a we did a short film every single week. So we made 52 films in the year. And we did a ton of photography work. We did photos every day. We did all these. It's too complex to get into, but all of these deadlines. We did an EP every 3 months. So there was like an 8-song EP for each season. And each season was like done with all these different collaborators from all over the world and different artists. And and it worked. It didn't keep people's attention. So for that part, it didn't work. And people maybe didn't follow us all the way through, and maybe they got real bored, or maybe it got really pretentious for them. We did a lot of short films in different languages and different things and whatever. So I think it lost people almost from the get-go. But the thing that it was really, really pleasurable, it was like the most satisfying, it was like the most successful thing I've ever done, as far as we set these enormous goals for ourselves, and we accomplished, as far as output, and we accomplished all of them. And the only reason we were able to accomplish it was because before we started, we laid the whole thing out. Like, each short film was going to come out on a Tuesday, and like we had them all in the calendar, so it's like whatever it was, January 1, the song comes out, January 8th, the next video comes out, January 15th, the next one comes out, so forth. And we sent this, list of like, oh, short film number 47 comes out in November of whatever, and since they were all there and they were all these like self-imposed deadlines, everybody took it deadly serious. And we made every deadline. We got every song out. We got every photograph up. We got every video out just because it was like, it was written in advance, So, but like I said, it wasn't successful. It was nowhere near as successful as this is, as engaging people. Like this has been way more, it's also because of the time we live in, where there's more like social interaction and social media and everything is more common than it was in 2009. So, but this is like, Q36 is much more vibrant and like colorful and has many more voices and has many more layers to it, that hopefully makes it a more satisfying like thing to like join in with us on,
I think so. It is like a universe, this whole thing that you're doing, which is so fitting for the album itself. And it immerses people. It's interactive. There's a lot of things to catch on to. So I think in like a case study of like an album release, this is a really cool thing you've got going on, and I'm excited to see it through.
Yeah, me too. I think the thing that is a mystery for all of us, and knock on wood, it will be, everybody's safe. As many people are safe and as healthy as could be, through this next, like this very strange time that we're all living in. And the thing that we're not sure about is we're supposed to have a physical release in June for the album on vinyl, but we don't know anything about when people can even go to work or be safe and whatever, produce vinyl and produce artwork and produce all the physical things.
Right.
All of the stuff that we can do from home is like, this is, one of the things I'll say, we should end around here somewhere, but one of the things I'll say is that I feel very fortunate about is that I have a lot of friends who are creative people, and many of them have like pieces of art or albums or things that are, the whole thing is coming out at this point, I'm not friends with her, but I'm just thinking like Fiona Apple has her new album coming out, and it's coming out, boom, right? And it's coming out in the middle of this thing, which, and it's a lot of people that were releasing right at the beginning of the crisis just got blindsided with, oh, fuck, I just worked my whole life or the last 2 years of my life to make this piece of art to share with everybody. And now I can no longer, the album has got swept up into the pandemic and into everybody's concerns. And it's just getting tossed aside, and they're not able to promote it, and they're not able to go on the road and do it the way that they do it. And I felt very fortunate and lucky that we had started on the path that we've been on, and had already been on it, where it's all created from our homes, and it's all done in a way that we can continue, and that the songs that came out right around the time of the beginning of the pandemic got swept up in it, like it did for everybody. There's just that's the way it should be.
There's good news,
yeah, there's nothing else you can't. There's nothing you can do about it. Bob Dylan put his album out on 9/11, and that's you're not gonna. There's bigger things in the world, right? Mm-hmm. But I felt very fortunate with this, that the album isn't really dependent on any one song, and so it doesn't really matter. Nothing's gonna. There's not like a hit single that holds it all up. That it's all, we have to hit a home run, or else nobody will hear this record, or we have to go on the road, because when this record is over, we're done. Like, it's when this record comes out, the promotion for it is done. That will be it. This is how we're promoting it.
No plan to tour, even if that becomes possible again. Yeah.
No. For many reasons, but I don't think that. It seems to me, from everything I've heard, I've heard my friends try to be optimistic about, hey, so-and-so state, we're going to reschedule for something. And I'm like, we're going to reschedule for whatever date, July, something or whatever. And you're like, that's not happening. I mean, like, you can't schedule anything for any event to bring any number of people together. And it may be 18 months before we're done, not to be too bleak about it, but it may be 24 months. It could be much. And I think everybody's coming to grips with that as we're going through this. Like this, this could take hold for a long time. Hopefully it won't, but it doesn't seem like there's any sense in making any plans for public gatherings. Like, it's just, we just all have to wait and see, and just do the best we can with, and do whatever, like, I've never felt like I had to tell, our fan base anything of stay safe and do this kind of stuff and do, whatever, wear gloves or wear, social distancing. Our fan base I've always felt have been like a very bright group of people who are like very thoughtful and understanding and caring about situations. And I just like, oh, you guys are, you guys know what to do. So we're all in this together, and just, and we'll see it through together. But there's, the idea of getting any number of people into a room in the next 2 years to me seems kind of a stretch, but maybe, but that's what's been nice about this, is we have been able to have this. We have been able to, through Hit Record, through Ivan and his creations, through all the people that we're working with, the way that we're putting out stuff. I feel like we have been together, and we have shared something together, and we are in each other's lives, and we are having like intimate moments, even though everybody's in their cubicles or whatever,
Yeah. Well, I've gotten a good escapism from the album myself too in this weird time, and it's almost a weird album because as isolated as we are, and then you picture like the spaceman in the little capsule, it kind of feels like that's how we're all living. But it's been a nice reprieve from that, so I appreciate it. Thank you.
Oh, I like we were talking about before. I do really, really, really appreciate that. I feel, this, obviously this, everything that's coming out now. This album isn't a reaction to our current situation, mm-hmm. but it's kind of nice to lose yourself in things that were created before that bring you right back to the moment. Mm-hmm. It's nice to have some escape for it. If it's a television show that was made before, or a movie that was made, or a book that was written before, something that's just, it's a nice way to like inhabit other worlds. And if this album does that for anybody, I'd be like thrilled,
Yeah.
And because I know that's how I escape, like, whatever, with the books I'm reading or the shows we're watching. And that helps me. And if the stuff that we're creating helps other people do that, and that's, very, very gratifying.
Yeah. And much appreciated. So we
All
send
right.
people to therentals.com. Is that the hub?
The rentals.com is essentially our, the place where you can see everything that Ivan's working on. It's all of his designs. The whole site is dedicated to Ivan. And then from there's a Bandcamp that you can get to from therentals.com that has all the releases as they're coming out. But of course, like the easiest stuff that I've found has been on Twitter and on Instagram, which is just the Rentals. So just at the Rentals. And mine is _ Matt Sharp for both. And I do occasionally post on Facebook, but I've never been a Facebook person. So it's just not a part of my language or how I do it. It is always right from the get-go seemed totally foreign to me as a place to congregate. So it's one of those things that I always forget to, like, oh, what haven't I done? It's like, oh, right, Facebook. Yeah. And I'll do it. And it's more, it's always a little bit more of a token when I do stuff there. Cause it's just like, oh yeah, it's like it's the thing I always forget.
You're supposed to do this too, Matt.
But you can do that there. You can follow us there. I mean, there's still news about all the songs on there, but it's not the best source. The best sources are our Instagram or our Twitter accounts.
Nice. Well, I got to thank you. This has been a real pleasure. It's real nice to hear your creative process and some of the old stories. Real treat for me. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, and likewise, I appreciate you having me on and sharing this album with your listeners. It means a lot to me.
I think they're going to like it. A lot of my crowd is the synthesizer sound design people, and they're going to enjoy it for that. And yeah, it's like you said, a good escape, good fun, and it's nice to immerse yourself in a real heavy, long, like full course album. That's something like that we get less and less these days of.
Well, I think the last song is, I can't quite, because of the shift, because of the pandemic stuff, everything shifted 2 weeks. So I think the last song comes out maybe on June 2nd or something like that. Mm-hmm. So, but we have a song out that came out on Tuesday, and we'll have another one that's coming out this coming Tuesday, and then we'll be back to every 2 weeks.
Cool. I've really probably understated how much your work and music has meant to me and my whole group of friends. Honestly, it's really, the first concert I ever went to New York City to see was Weezer at Roseland Ballroom in '96 for Pinkerton, and there's just so many good memories. And so often when we get together, those songs, those two Weezer albums, and especially the first two rental albums, are constantly on our playlists when we're hanging out. And
that's awesome. That's awesome. Well, tell your friends I said hi for sure. I definitely remember those Roseland shows very well. All those New York shows were super fucking energetic, and like just we always loved playing in New York in those days. I remember.
Hit us at such a good time. I mean, we were going into the city the first time unsupervised, and seemed like our favorite band. And, I mean, we were playing in bands, and we were watching you guys, and I mean.
Yeah, all that stuff. I had those moments in my life at the same age, so I did totally get it.
Yeah, formative years,
Yeah.
But cool, man.
All right, my friend.
Stay healthy, be well, and be listening to the new songs as they come out.
Awesome.
All right. Take care, Matt. Thank you.
Bye.